Thank you for joining this Water News podcast. I'm David Duncan, broadcasting on behalf of OOSKAnews, the world's leading provider of news related to global water challenges. You can find our water news at www.ooskanews.com. That's OOSKANEWS.com. The annual United Nations Climate Change Conference, or COP, they're known as COPs, convened in November this year in Marrakech, Morocco, and was attended by about 30,000 individuals from governments, the private sector, civil society and NGOs. Focal issues of this 22nd COP, or COP22 as it's known, included water scarcity, water cleanliness and water-related sustainability to an unprecedented and welcome degree. OOSKAnews attended and reported on the Marrakech conference. I had an opportunity to talk to a number of attendees and participants with particular water-related perspectives on climate change.
Good morning, Lisa to HeuHeu, and welcome to the World Water Council booth at COP22. Please introduce yourself and tell our listeners why you're here.
Thank you, David. It's a real pleasure to be in the World Water Council booth. Very strong and passionate about water issues and climate issues, so it's a real privilege to be here. So Lisa te HeuHeu, I'm a New Zealand Māori Indigenous descent, and I'm 35 years old. I'm currently the Global Steering Committee representative for the Pacific region on the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on climate change. And my background is an interesting one. So I've got degrees in science, management and planning, which support why I'm involved in the environmental sector. I work for Indigenous organisations through my professional career, also done academic research around environmental and water issues, worked for agriculture industries as well, improving their performance in terms of water use and water management, but also land use and management. And more recently, been doing a lot of work on the climate change space. So this is my second COP. Again, it's one of those places where you find, as you come together as a caucus, trying to find the energy to work in different priority spaces. We're a thin team. I'm one of two Pacific region representatives, so we're trying to link up with as many Pacific delegates as we can to make sure that our issues are heard, not only on climate change, but water and land management as well.
And specifically around water, how does your forum engage with water challenges?
I think in terms of the International Indigenous Peoples Forum, we are concentrating predominantly at the COP around some of the high-level issues regarding climate change, but it can't be separated from those water issues. So when we think about Pacific Islands, for example, access to clean, fresh water on a daily basis and our ability to express our cultural daily work around feeding our families, how we create identity is all associated with fresh water. So part and parcel of working on climate change is to say, well, yes, we've got drivers around influencing policy, and some of those drivers are having access to that clean, fresh water on a daily basis.
And you were mentioning earlier that you have a creative approach to educating people about water challenges.
Yeah, I think one of the exciting parts of why I love being involved in this process is that you can bring different parts of your own experience and your different organisations that you're part of to the table. YourExpedition.com and Access Water is a key component of why I work on water issues. So more recently have done a 2-month expedition trekking to the source of the Ganga, the Ganges River in India, and rafting the full length of the river out to the Bay of Bengal in Kolkata. And through that trip, using different members from around the world on our expedition team, communicating in partnership with the UN and UNESCO around water curriculum, access to water. What does it mean for a young child to have a relationship with the Ganga, to see their mother wash their clothes in the Ganga, put their rubbish in the Ganga, yet it's respected and revered as a spiritual body. At the end of the day, it's respecting their relationship, but also it's part of their sustenance. And so creating education programs that raise their awareness around how valuable that resource is a part of what really drives us.
And you're from New Zealand, and some of our readers may be aware of some interesting exemplars of catchment-based collaborative water management there. I believe you've been involved in that.
Yeah, so I think what's really important to understand is that there's legislation in New Zealand which regulates the use and discharge of water and how we utilise water. And given that fresh water has become such a high priority in terms of economic use, recreation use, but also customary use from an Indigenous perspective, New Zealand's taken the initiative to say, okay, in this particular catchment, and the catchment that I'm going to talk about is the Waikato River. The Waikato River stems from Lake Taupo, which is in central North Island. It then flows out to the west of the islands to Port Waikato. And over the last few years, a collaborative stakeholder group has been formally pulled together, which is made up of agriculture, industry, tribal organisations, regulatory organisations, environmental protection organisations, to the point that at the very first meeting there was 190 stakeholders represented in that collaborative meeting. So you can imagine at the very start those conflicting views around the overall vision, what is the priority for the catchment, and how do you actually take all of that into account in a collaborative process. I take my hats off to Waikato Regional Council, which is the catchment body for this river, who did very well to manage that process. And what's happened as a result of that is that a high-level policy statement called the Vision and Strategy has been developed, which all of the stakeholders have now bought into, which says this is our ultimate goals for the river. And every single stakeholder have now agreed to that. What will flow from that now is intricate detail around the regulatory process that will happen as a result of that high-level vision and strategy. I think the one thing to take note is when you have a strategy like this that in one foul swoop managed to become one of the highest level policies in our legislative context without contest is a huge achievement for those collaborative stakeholders. And from a tribal perspective, to not have to battle that, to not have to say, hey farmers, we want you to agree with this. Everybody's now at the table saying, actually we all value water in the same respect. The challenge will now come to how we practice that and implement it on a daily basis. So it's an exciting time.
Very exciting. And in less happy news, New Zealand has been in the news in the last week or so because of the violent earthquake. Has that had an impact on local resources? Has it had an impact on tribal communities?
I think that with any kind of earthquake, and New Zealand is prone to its fair share of natural disasters. So if it's not an earthquake, it's a volcanic eruption, and sometimes it's a cyclone. I think what all of these disaster scenarios raise for us is how precious those resources like water are. In the Hutt Valley, for example, in the Wellington area, that community is on the cusp of being evacuated because they're cut off from infrastructure, so the roads are unable to be used. Kaikoura have had disruption to their transport systems. The potential issues here are whether we're able to get clean, fresh water to those communities, particularly in an infrastructure perspective. But thinking from a tribal perspective too, a lot of our marae, which are our traditional meeting houses, are on these vulnerable coasts. So when you have an earthquake, for example, what tends to happen is that the infrastructure is the first to go. And with a lot of those rural communities, a lot of the water is coming from rain collection, which is quite easily damaged from an earthquake. I'm still yet to hear of any of our communities which have been severely affected by the earthquake, but once again it raises the need for us to be thinking about these situations given the context of where New Zealand sit in these disaster prone areas.
Thank you very much, Lisa, to HeuHeu. I hope you enjoy the rest of this COP.
Thank you very much, David, appreciate it.